Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I wanted to share with you some of the decks that I use for the full moon, as well as decks I use for my work with Mother Mary. So today we're going to be taking a look at another basket full of decks. So I have a few things on my table here that I generally incorporate into my full moon work. I have my Mary journal, which is always close at hand during this time. I have my little rose quartz skull, whose name is Rosie. Real original, I know. I have my little candle, which is on this mandala. It's a little cauldron candle. I'm not going to light it today because we're not really in magical space. I'm just going to share with you some of the things that I use during this time. And of course, I have my goddess statue, which helps me connect to the goddess energy and the way that I view my work with Mother Mary. So for decks, the primary deck that I work with for my full moon readings is my Mysteries of Mary Tarot. Now this is the deck that forms the sort of focal point of my reading. It is a gorgeously produced deck and one that I quite enjoy working with. I do rely very heavily on the guidebook for this particular deck, and so I do often have that at hand as well. This deck is just, it's so beautiful. The detail in these little sculptures that she's created is just amazing. I do like to really hone in on the details that we find in each of these, and that's kind of key to the way that I work with these particular cards and the energies during the full moon. So a beautiful, beautiful deck that is just full of such great intention and wonderful information. As I mentioned, the guidebook is quite pivotal to how I work with this deck. I do always read every entry in the guidebook for the card, even if it's one that's popped up before. I always reread it so that I can re-familiarize myself with the story that revolves around each card. And it's a lovely deck to serve as not only a focal point for a reading, but also as an altar card. And I've used it for that as well many times. But this is by far my most favorite deck to work with, particularly with my Mary work and for my full moon readings. It definitely has a wonderful energy for that. It's very nurturing and supportive, but I also find that it also reveals a lot of information. So a couple of the tarot decks that I like to pull in for using messages in association with my full moon work is the Ember and Aura Tarot. Now this deck is also a deck that I use a lot for self-care readings, but it does also have sort of that Mother Mary undertone to it for me. There is a card, I believe, of Mary Magdalene, and I know there is a card for Jesus. There he is, he's the Hierophant. And so it does have a little bit of that, I don't want to say Christian, but yeah, Christian undertone to it. So this deck definitely has that sort of full potential of the full moon energy for me. It's very nurturing and very supportive, but it also really opens things up to really seeing the full embodiment of the message or of the energy. So it's one that I really enjoy working with for my full moon readings, and I often pull it into those readings as sort of more of the expansion message, whereas my Mysteries of Mary often serves as my focal point. It does really have a wonderful nurturing energy to it, much as I feel Mother Mary does, and so that's probably why that connection is there for me a little bit. It's just one that I really enjoy working with. I have modded this deck. I trimmed the gilding off of it and re-edged it in this kind of softer mauve color, but it's one that I definitely enjoy working with for the full moon. So two other decks that often make it into my full moon readings is the Moonchild Tarot and the Starchild Tarot. These both have that kind of full moon energy for me. Again, they're very much full of potential, full of nurturing and understanding. I really love the grounded nature of the Moonchild. I do have a video in detail about how I work with this particular deck. Because it is one of my favorites, but it is one that I often pull into for my full moon readings as well. It definitely has that sort of moon vibe to it, right? We are looking at the Moonchild Tarot, so it definitely has a full moon energy to me. Even though the colors are a bit on the paler side, it is still very colorful. It feels open and expansive and really pulls in that full moon energy for me. So definitely one of my favorites, just in general, and I use this deck for a lot of different things, but it is one that I use often for my full moon readings, and I just love working with it. Similar to that, we have the Starchild Tarot. So this is a newer one in my collection, and one that it kind of took me a little bit of time to get to know this deck and to be able to work with it in depth. But I do find that it works really well for my new moon readings as well. It's not really a foundational deck for that practice for me, but it's one that I do find myself pulling into that. It has a little bit more of an ethereal feel than the Moonchild. The Moonchild feels a little bit more grounded, a little bit more stable, and the Starchild feels a little bit more in the realm of spirit, a little bit more in the cosmos. And so I think it does work really well for the full moon energy because, again, we do get that sense of expansiveness. It's quite colorful. The colors are a bit poppier than they are in the Moonchild. But it works really beautifully for that type of reading as well. So it's definitely one that I enjoy pulling into those readings, and oftentimes I enjoy working with alongside the Moonchild and some of Danielle Noel's other oracle decks. So definitely a gorgeous deck. It took me a little bit of time to come to terms with this particular deck. There are a few cards that I really, really love and a few cards that I have some issues with, but in general, it's one that I definitely enjoy working with, and I do find that it works really well. So another little deck that I really enjoy working with for the full moon is the Mesquite Tarot. So a lot of these decks are also the same decks that I use for self-care decks, and that is because for me, the full moon does feel very much like a self-care time. It's a time of really tapping into your own potential, a time of really expanding on your own abilities. And for me, it's also a time of remembering that I need to take care of myself as well, right? I need to nurture myself along with everything else. The Mesquite Tarot is a lovely little pip style deck. I do believe this one is still out of print. I keep hoping it will come back. It would make an excellent little tarot in a tin for someone like US Games. But it is just the most fantastic little reader, and I so enjoy the color palette. I enjoy the way the court cards are created, and it's a lovely, lovely little deck. Has a really great energy to it, really very minimalistic art, but I find that that doesn't limit my ability to get really expansive messages out of it in any way. I do want to mention the little guidebook because that is actually fantastic, and I do enjoy reading the guidebook because it's a bit like poetry in here, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. It's very concise in its keywords, but it does have this lovely bit of poetry that really ties you into the energy of the message, and so I really enjoy that. I do believe that the guidebook is available from the creator on their website as a download. I will double check that. But as far as I know at this time, this deck is still out of print. Hopefully it will be back soon. I do believe that the creators are looking for a publisher, so hopefully it will get picked up soon because it is a fantastic deck, and I would love to see it offered mass market so that everybody could get their hands on it. So speaking of little tarots in a tin, another deck that I love to use for my full moon readings is the White Sage Tarot, and this is the mass market little tin edition from US Games. It's again another one that's very nurturing. I love the pip style nature of it, but it's still very expansive in its messages. It's very soft, very nurturing. And it's also a really wonderful deck to tap into that sort of self-care energy as well. I use this one quite often for that, but it's definitely one of my favorite little decks. This is one of those decks that kind of just makes me smile every time I see it. Beautiful little deck, has little the animal energy in it that flows all throughout, which is really wonderful. Very much a pip style deck, so not fully illustrated scenes, but I love a pip deck because, oh, look at that. So pretty. It's very simple, very understated, but very powerful messages come from this deck. Very nurturing, very supportive messages. I love this Devil card. It's one of my favorites. And the Pentacle Court because they're elephants. So, so beautiful. So one of the oracle decks that I sometimes pull into my full moon readings is the Goddess Oracle. And this is one of my favorite goddess oracles. I actually don't have many because this one really does just cover all the bases for me. I love the artwork, I love the keywords, and the guidebook is fantastic. So a lot of times I like to add this deck as a focal point for my full moon readings as well. It has a great energy to it. I think it was really it's very, again, very bright, supportive, colorful, and it just feels very full of that potential and those expansive messages. I really like to see things be a little bit softer, a little bit more colorful, a little bit more nurturing during the full moon, as opposed to during the dark moon when I tend to close in on things. And I tend to look for those decks that are a little bit sharper tongued, a little bit darker in not only their nature, but also in their artwork. Whereas during the full moon, I tend to like to lighten things up, to open things up a little bit. And this deck just works beautifully for that. It is the deck that I had used primarily for my full moon readings as the focal point for my full moon readings prior to getting my Mysteries of Mary Tarot. And it's definitely one that I will pull back in at some point again as well. But I do use it quite often to add that goddess energy to my full moon readings. It's just a gorgeous deck. So beautiful, and again, I really like the keywords, and I love the messages that are in the guidebook. There's also wonderful rituals in the guidebook, which I enjoy tapping into as well. So another oracle deck that I sometimes like to pull into my full moon readings is the Sacred Creators Oracle by Chris Ann. This is the Indie edition, so it has the beautiful matte gilding, gorgeous backs. This I like to use a lot of times as an intention setting deck for full moon readings. So I will pull a card from this and then lay a spread around it and let this be sort of the intention for the reading. And sometimes I will use it as a wrap-up message as well. So I'll do a full moon reading and then pull one of these at the end to create a sort of wrap-up message for the reading itself, something to carry with me through the full moon phase. I really love this deck. I love the simplicity of it. I love the keywords that are on it. The guidebook is quite nice, but to be perfectly honest, I never use it. This deck is available in mass market as well now. And however, I don't have that one because I already have this one, but it is one that I do like to use quite often in my full moon readings. I use this deck a lot of times for work or creative related readings as well. So again, just another really beautiful oracle deck. I think this one is more geared towards, as it's called, the Sacred Creator. So it is more about manifesting and creating, but I think it also works beautifully for moon readings. And just look at those colors. Again, so can you see my theme? There's definitely a theme. Pretty colors, soft images, and supportive messages. That's kind of my theme. Okay, so I've cleared us off a little space so we can just take a quick look at some of the different card combos that I like to use for my full moon readings. The first that I like to use, actually more for my Mary work than my full moon readings, is the Mysteries of Mary Tarot combined with the Angel Blessing cards. Now this is a combination that I tend to use more in line with my Mary work than necessarily full moon work, because what I like is that the Mary card kind of provides the main message, and then these are the angelic messages that sort of come to bring that depth to the message itself. And so I think it works really beautifully for that. It's just a really nice, soft tie-in to the Mysteries of Mary Tarot, where we get these gorgeous angelic cards with these gorgeous angelic messages. And I think they work really well together. It's kind of like, to me, this feels like a reading that is very much stems from the heavens, and I really enjoy working with these two together. I do believe I forgot to actually mention the angel blessing cards when I was talking about the different cards that I actually use in my full moon work, and that is probably primarily because I tend to use this more for my work in messages from Mary rather than just strictly for the full moon. I do love the way that these cards pair together. There's just something so soft and beautiful about the angel blessing cards, and then you kind of got this nice beautiful pop of color with the Mysteries of Mary in between. And it just feels like a very supportive and nurturing combination. So the angel blessing cards, this is actually a vintage copy. Look at that gorgeous kind of tan edge. I think that's just from use. I think because this is a very old deck, and I did get a copy of it used on eBay. And it definitely has been well used and well loved prior to me, but I am also really loving it and enjoying working with it as well. So one of my favorite pairings to use for my full moon readings is actually the Goddess Oracle combined with the Ember and Aura Tarot. Now, a lot of times with this particular deck, I'm using the Oracle card as the central message, as the focal point, and then the tarot cards create the message that expands around it. And that's generally my go-to for 3-card readings. As you'll see, you know, I love 3-card readings. I do them almost every week, or I should say my weekly readings are almost always 3-card readings. And I think there's just so much that can be gained from this. I love the combination of the focal point card in the middle and then the outward message expanding from there using different decks. And this one is just one of my favorites. I find that the Goddess Oracle really does provide a great, very nurturing central point, and then the Ember and Aura really helps to kind of expand upon that message beautifully. So I think they're two just beautiful decks that work wonderfully together. I really like the way they converse with each other. And so these two decks are really lovely together. They're kind of a staple not only for my full moon readings, but also for my self-care readings. I tend to use these two decks a lot for self-care readings. And I love when we can pick up the play of color between the cards. So we definitely have the kind of yellowish background in the Four of Swords almost encasing it all. This beautiful explosion of color with Sekhmet here, and then the fire from the wands themselves. I just find that the messages are just so beautiful with these two decks. So another one of my favorite card combinations to use not only for my full moon readings, but again, also for self-care readings. You'll see that there's definitely a common theme where self-care does tend to be something that I focus on in the full moon. But here we have the Goddess Oracle paired with the White Sage Tarot. And this again is just a really beautiful combination. I love the pippiness of the White Sage Tarot. It just offers those really supportive messages. And then to pair that with this gorgeous goddess energy and their messages just makes for a really beautiful combination. The decks work really well together in terms of their art styles. They're very compatible. They have very compatible color palettes. And even you can see here, because I've trimmed the Goddess Oracle and taken the borders off the outside, even with these cards having all their white borders at the bottom, just looks really lovely. I find that this is another combination that is really supportive and offers me some really great self-care and affirmative messages that really help me to tap into the more positive aspects of self. These decks are a great reminder of that. Sometimes we can be really, really hard on ourselves. And I like to use combinations like this as a reminder to be kinder to myself. To be gentler, to allow myself to feel the things that I need to feel, but to not berate myself for those feelings, right? I love this. We have grief, judgment, and the Eight of Cups with one of the cups tumbling over. I think a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to feel our feelings. There's a difference between acknowledging and feeling your feelings and wallowing in them, right? And this is a wonderful deck for me to just really allows me to get in touch with the softer side of myself. It really reminds me to be kind to myself. And so this combination tends to be one that I pull out when I've been particularly hard on myself, not only just for my full moon readings, but I love that in the full moon, that is a reminder to me to be nice to myself, right? To spend some time in self-care, to allow myself to be fully embodied in whatever it is that I'm experiencing. For me, the full moon is not like diving deep into the darkness. You know, that's kind of how I see my dark moon work. That's diving deep into the self. In the full moon, I like to bring things into the light. It is about experiencing and accepting things as they are. And I think that these two decks are probably my favorite for that particular work of just really tapping into self and acknowledging and experiencing things for what they are and knowing that they are a part of you and that's okay. Look at this. We have Nourishment with the Corn Woman, the Chariot, and the Page of Swords. Look at the colors between these decks. I mean, I feel like they were just made for each other. So beautiful. Lots of powerful images here. We have boundaries, we have the Knight and the Emperor. Lots of power in that particular spread. So yeah, just really beautiful imagery. Here we have cups surrounding this very watery card for illness and wellness. Right? We have to bring things into harmony, bring things into balance in order to grow and move forward and heal ourselves. So in addition to working with my cards, I also have my Mary journal. This is my B6 Duchess from Shakespeare. Now again, I'm not going to show like the details inside, but I'll just show you real quick what I have in here. I've done some decoration in the front, just some copies of some of the cards from the Mysteries of Mary Tarot that I really do enjoy. And so I have those in there. Back here is a written prayer to Mother Mary that is kind of like a dedication to this journal as well. And in here, I have my devotions, prayers, readings, things of that nature. This is all very personal in nature, so I'm not going to actually flip through that. But that's a really wonderful thing to have in here. And then in here, I have some of my Mary just sort of research that I've done. This one I can show because it's just, you know, basically working through just some of the symbols, some of the history and things of that nature that I work with along the way. Here's a little bit about the full moon. So again, this is more of just kind of like my research journal. And then I have my devotional journal in the front here where I do all of my personal writings. So that's the journal that I primarily use for my work with Mother Mary, along with the Mysteries of Mary Tarot. Those are both kind of my key tools for my work with Mother Mary. So that's a look at some of the decks that I like to use for my full moon readings and my work with Mother Mary. Thank you for joining me today. You'll find links for everything featured here in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.